4:34 on Monday, May the 9th. I call this meeting of the Clear Creek Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been duly called and that its notice has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. And we have a quorum of board members. And so we will move immediately into closed session as authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Section 551.001 concerning purposes permitted by the act, including 551.071 consultation with attorney, 551.072 deliberation regarding real property, 551.074 deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignments, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public employee, or to hear a complaint or charge against an employee. And with that, I will move us into closed session at 4:35. next on the agenda is community input. I don't think we have any community input, so we'll move to item 5, action on closed session items. Do I have a motion for item A?
Yes, Mr. President, I move that the Board of Trustees approve the settlement agreement as presented in executive session in TEA document number 137-SE-0122, SOAH docket number 701-22-1533. I further authorize the superintendent to execute the settlement agreement as presented in the executive session.
Thank you for that motion, Mrs. Davis. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Is there any comment? Seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. We will move on to item B. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President?
Mr. Cottrell?
I would like to make the recommendation that we approve the superintendent's recommendation for high school principal, Dr. Mandy Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dr. DuPont. And seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approval of the motion, please raise your right hand. And that carries unanimously. And I'll turn it over to you when we get done with the second one,
Certainly.
Dr. Williams. And item C, do I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Bowen?
I move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation of Dr. Brent Kirkpatrick for intermediate principal.
Thank you for that motion, Mr. Bowen. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. And seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. And Dr. Williams?
Yes, we are pleased with the board's approval of these recommendations. Dr. Mandy Scott has 25 years' experience in education, and she currently serves, as you all each know, as principal at Creekside Intermediate. And we think she's a great match. She's got extensive administrative experience, including serving as principal at both the intermediate level and the high school levels, but also serving in several other administrative roles, including assistant principal at intermediate and high school level, as well as dean of instruction and associate principal at the high school level. And she certainly has a demonstrated track record of, in terms of effective instructional leadership and also ability to engage others in working towards school vision. And we're also enthusiastic about Dr. Kirkpatrick being named as principal at League City Intermediate. And by the way, I don't know if the words if the words Clear Springs High School came out of my mouth in the context of Dr. Scott, but the placement is specifically for Clear Springs High School. And so going back to Dr. Kirkpatrick being named, he'll be serving as principal at League City Intermediate. He brings extensive experience as well to the role, 23 years in education. He currently serves as assistant principal at Seabrook Intermediate, and he previously served as assistant principal at Westbrook as the WAVE program there was starting. And he has served also as a principal in Rockdale ISD, and we think his extensive administrative experience on both the WAVE campus and a Magnet campus, as well as other locations, makes him a very good match for this position. So again, we are pleased that the board has approved these two recommendations.
And thank you, Dr. Williams, and congratulations to those individuals. We'll move on to item 6, our action items, and we'll start off with A, consider approval of human resource report. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the monthly human resources report as presented.
And thank you for that motion, Dr. DuPont. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Is there any comment? Seeing no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. And we'll move on to item B. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the contract renewals for employees assigned to professional positions.
Thank you again, Dr. DuPont. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Right. And that motion carries unanimously. And next, we'll move on to item C. Consider approval of the SHAC charges, timeline, and process for appointing membership.
Good
Do I-
evening, Board of Trustees.
Good evening.
I'm here to share with you some information and to seek your approval of charges, guidelines, and timelines for the membership appointment process for the School Health Advisory Committee, otherwise known as SHAC. SHAC is back. For many
You were
of
looking
us,
forward to saying
I
that.
have been looking forward to. For many of us, SHAC sometimes feels like a worship going into battle just because of many of the different areas that it covers. But the last legislative session and the second special session addressed SHAC specifically, as well as Policy Update 118 that was addressed in the fall. And then I'll share with you the SHAC manual, the guide that the Texas Education Agency has released back in January, just a few months ago. Texas Education Code Section 28.004 does govern the establishment of SHAC for every school district. It's an advisory group consisting of members from different areas of the community, and I'll share a membership with you near the end. The job of this committee is to make sure that the school district's health programs reflect local community values. Just a sample of, in the past, what has SHAC done? So in the past, this committee has gathered together. They've received a lot of different reports, but some of the ways in which they've been influential are to draft policy, local policy FFA on the district's wellness policy. They establish procedures for consideration for child nutrition and specifically leftover food procedures. And they were instrumental in drafting FFAC regulation dealing with wellness and health services medical treatment, particularly related to the EpiPen or epinephrine auto-injectors. Some additional policies that really govern SHAC directly and indirectly include policies BDF legal and EHEE legal. Those are around the organization of citizen advisory committees as well as the basic instructional program for required instruction. EHAA local, which is the same extension of the legal policy but for local, and that articulates the role of SHAC in recommending curriculum materials for human sexuality instruction, as well as FFA legal and FFEA legal related to child nutrition and the comprehensive school health program. The other key guidance areas are directly from the school health advisory councils. I've included a link to their website on the screen, and I also referred to earlier the School Health Advisory Council Guide for Texas School Districts. That guide was revised in January of 2022 to reflect all the changes from the last legislative session and special session. The expected outcomes, just a few of them, but these are major. I just wanted to bring just how big some of the changes are. SHAC is expected to create bylaws, their own strategic plan, of course, nested within the district's plan. It's not Robert Baird's opinion that they need to create a strategic plan, but this is part of the SHAC manual. They're expected to form a subcommittee for student physical health, activity, and fitness, review the comprehensive school counseling program, review and recommend adoption of PE and health courses, as well as look at some of the other required courses, not courses, but presentations and for students, such as for the puberty lessons and healthy choices. There are committee charges that we have put together, and these are based on the Texas Education Code and the SHAC guide. So the first committee charge is to consider issues related to student physical activity and fitness and make policy recommendations to increase physical activity and improve fitness among students. The second committee charge is to recommend appropriate methods of instruction for human sexuality instruction and grade levels to receive such instruction. The third committee charge is to develop strategies to achieve a safe and healthy school environment, inclusive of mental health services, substance abuse prevention, and child nutrition. And the fourth charge is to identify community programming to increase parental awareness of risky behaviors, early warning signs of suicide risks, and behavioral health concerns. So you can see there's a wide range of responsibilities that this committee is expected to cover during their terms. We've identified 4 guidelines as well. Before I cover the guidelines, I also want to let you know that in determining these committee charges and guidelines, we also looked at previous charges and guidelines to make sure that they were in line with what we've done as a district, for example, Facility Advisory Committee, School Boundaries, or Safety Committee. And they are in line with those charges and guidelines. The 4 guidelines that we have for this committee: to adhere to state law regarding the roles and responsibilities of SHAC, consider constructive public feedback throughout the recommendation process, approach sensitive topics with care, recognizing parents are the primary decision maker concerning their children's health and well-being, and consider CCISD's financial position and identifying resources that might be available from local, state, or federal. Our process for appointing membership follows the Texas Education Code. It does require that the majority of membership are parents. A parent must serve as chair or co-chair. Our parents will serve in 2-year staggered terms, except for this coming school year. And I'm calling it the 4+2, because there will be 4 meetings plus 2 in June and August. I say staggered terms because this year we'll have some members that complete only 1 term, while others complete 2 years, and then each successive term will be a 2-year term. So we'll have 15 parents. With your approval, 15 parents by random drawing, 1 elementary school, 1 intermediate school, and 1 high school parent from each of the 5 CCISD Board of Trustee electoral districts. We'll include 7 staff members from health and PE, our secondary health teacher, as well as the district areas of health and PE, counseling, child nutrition, prevention, and a nurse. We'll seek to have 3 health community members and 3 students. You might wonder why 3 students and not 5 students. If we up that to 5 students, then it becomes an equal number of parents to everyone else. And so in order to keep the majority as parents, we have 3 students, but that would be rotated among the 7 high schools over a 5-year period, over continuation. General meeting structure is that there are 4 meetings per year, generally June, August, October, and January. Agendas are created based on requirements. As I mentioned before, there will be additional subcommittee meetings, particularly for the fitness to start. One of the big changes that SHAC must be operated as a board meeting. Meetings must be posted within 72 hours of the meeting date. The meeting must be recorded by audio and posted within 10 days. And so that's similar to board meetings. As well, annual reports need to be presented to the board, and we'll present them in March. And we will aim to solicit for new membership in April of each subsequent year. The timeline for SHAC. So we provide the charge and guidelines as well as the timeline in your Friday packet on May 6th. We are seeking approval from you tonight. On May 10th, that's a big day with your approval, which is tomorrow. We would send a letter to parents to submit application for consideration. Our Director of Counseling and Student Services will work to identify 3 community health members. And our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education will work with principals to identify 3 students this year from Lake, Creek, and Springs with parent permission. One thing I didn't talk about the students, will they be at every meeting at every minute? Possibly not, but it is important to have student voice in our committees. May 19th, the application window will close. at noon, followed by a lottery held at 3:00 p.m. May 23rd, we would submit a formal roster to the Board of Trustees for consideration for the board meeting, or at the board meeting. And with your approval, we would notify participants the next day on May 24th, followed by SHAC meetings in June and August. So, with that, SHAC is back. I'll say it again, and I welcome your questions or comments. And unfortunately, Ms. David West is at home ill tonight, so she couldn't be here.
Thank you for that presentation, Dr. Bayard. I will open it up for questions.
I have a question. So back in the 1900s, like 1985-ish, we had a like governor's challenge physical fitness thing that we used to have to do when we were in elementary school. Or maybe it was the president's
That
challenge,
was
but
before, yeah, never mind.
Governor White did it. And so I was curious, is that something that SHAC could come out and say, let's do it? Because, you know, even throughout the last year or so, we've heard so much emphasis on physical health, and COVID has brought a lot of that to the surface. So is that something that SHAC will be able to do?
Absolutely. In fact, that is specific to probably one of the subcommittees that would be required to address physical activity and fitness. Our students were doing the fitnessgram and are still continuing. So that's similar to probably what used to be the governor's challenge, but this is the committee that will oversee and make recommendations to that.
Good. Okay.
I have a question. Would there be any value, I know the parents are chosen at random drawing. Is there any value to the staff members and the health community members also being chosen by random drawing?
The staff members that we'd like to serve in this committee would be knowledgeable, most knowledgeable about the different components. And so, for example, for child nutrition, we would lean on Fred Walker or Lacey. You know, for health services, we would have leaned on Marina Keaton, for example, or a couple of the lead nurses. And so we're looking for experts to be able to support the parents that are in this committee and provide them accurate information and help us to abide by all the requirements that we're supposed to.
How about for the community, the health community members? Would there be a value to a random drawing for those? Do you think there's several out there who would like to be a part of our advisory board?
I'm not sure. There could be. In the past, SHAC has been one of the committees that there's been a struggle to have membership in. And so even seeking 3 health community members could be a challenge. We are aiming to have the meetings in the evenings to hopefully make it easier for participants and parents to attend. But I'm hoping that we can find 3 that will stick with us for at least 4 meetings during the year. So to answer your question, yes, could it be beneficial if there are more than 3? I would love for this committee to get started this year, at least to have to jumpstart and get the committee back with the 6 meetings. And if we see that we have a greater interest among health community members, then perhaps next year we could do a drawing.
How would these be solicited, these community health members? How would they be solicited? Is there going to be a notice put in the newspaper? Is it by invitation? Or how are they going to be solicited?
For the parents?
No, for the community health members.
Oh, I think based on partnerships that we have with the different hospitals and health agencies that we've worked with over the years.
So like Methodist and HCA?
That would be my assumption. And I'm only making an assumption because Ms. West isn't here.
Okay. I'd be curious to get a little more information on that.
So one question I always have about these committees is when they how do they take votes? Are all of the staff and expert members going to be voting members of the committee alongside the parents and students?
This committee, that's why the requirements have parents as a majority, but there are 28 members of this committee. This committee doesn't include myself or Ms. Polson or Ms. West, who's leading this committee. We are non-voting members. We are facilitators. But this committee, one of the differences with this committee in years past is that there is a lot more influence that they have on the programs in the district.
Yeah, because what I've seen in committees in the past that have had this sort of makeup, where there's a parent component and then a staff component, is a majority of parents might want to go one direction, but then the staff unanimously goes the other direction, and so the aggregate vote ends up being in the direction that staff wants. And so is there some way we can prevent that from happening?
Generally, we look for consensus. If there's a split where parents want one direction and staff want a different direction, then that's not consensus. You know, sometimes there are a couple parents that might want a certain direction and the other 13 are all in agreement. And so we aim for consensus with that. But if there's a split, then we're not there.
Okay.
Scott, did you have a particular previous instance in mind? The thing that
Yes.
comes to mind was the school hours
Yes,
committee.
that's the one I'm thinking of, because I mean that was a very clear
It
instance
was very
where
clear,
there were administrators on the committee, and everyone could see how they voted, and so staff voted with them, and then parents wanted something different, but their voices were essentially drowned out by the staff members voting on the committee, and so that ended up being the recommendation, which was to not change anything. That went before the board. And so I want to make sure when we have these committees, if we're going to have parental involvement, it needs to, I mean, their votes need to be what ultimately controls the recommendation. And I'm happy to have staff in there to advise and to give information, but I don't like the idea of staff voting alongside parents in aggregate.
Mr. Sanchez.
Maybe clarification, Mr. Bowen. I think on slide 9, Dr. Bayard referenced the TEC section 28.004, which requires parents of students in the district who are not employed by the district to make up a majority of the members.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're describing maybe didn't reflect that as part of the requirement with the particular committee you're talking about. But I think in this case, if parents are making up a majority, and if they're a majority of this committee, and if they all felt
But they would all have to
If
feel
they-
a
if
certain
they
way.
would
So
all feel that way.
if parents are 15 and staff is 7, then if there was an aggregate vote, staff would only need to peel off about 4 parents out of the 15 in order to get a recommendation that was favorable to them. So if there was a disagreement. So even if a large majority of parents wanted to go one direction, they could still be outvoted by a minority of parents and the staff. So,
Yeah, I would observe there is membership besides the parents and staff, though. If I'm adding it up correctly, there's 28 total members, and 7 of those 28, so 25% would be staff.
I'm just saying, I've seen this play out before, and I'd like to just avoid making the same mistake. So,
Mr. Bowen, I'd just like to say, you may have an interpretation of how you saw things played out, and maybe by talking to certain people, but I don't like the wording of if staff can peel off a certain number of votes. That, to my knowledge, that's not what happens in those type of committee meetings. It never has. That's not the way the committee meeting happens. So I think we need to give some deference to the committee meeting with the charges that are presented to it and understanding how that happens and allow it to happen.
I did have a question. Dr. Bayard, on slide 11, it references one of the dates for May 10th, saying that Director of Counseling and Student Services identifying 3 community health members. I have an interpretation of what that means, but I just want to make sure that what I'm thinking is ultimately what it says. Are we ultimately talking about health professionals from our community? We're not talking about community. I don't know, maybe just when I read it, I was like, community health members. But I just wanted to make sure,
Yeah, the wording is 3 health members from the CCISD, from the community, yes, from the CCISD community.
okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's good. In policy BDF legal, it does say the composition, in addition to the board appointing members, may also appoint members such as classroom teachers, school counselors, school administrators, district students, healthcare professionals, senior citizens, the clergy, et cetera. But in the committee meetings, it's important that this committee doesn't operate on a like challenging each other. It's not in competition or anything. I think staff is there to inform, but the parents, students, and the community medical providers will be the largest influence of what happens and what comes out of those committees.
And ultimately, it comes before the board for a final decision.
That's correct.
And in fact, that's in the law.
They are making recommendations. They're not making the final decision. That still lies with the Board of Trustees.
I'm just saying, I've seen this movie before, and these are the exact same things that were said going into the school start time committee. And what we ended up with was, you look at the numbers of the votes that happened on it. Parents were on one side, staff was nearly unanimous for the status quo, and so the status quo became the recommendation. That went before the board, and then once there is a recommendation out of the committee that goes before the board, it is very, very hard to reject that recommendation because the committee has spoken, and it's hard to just send them back to the drawing board. So I don't know. I want to make sure that the parents on the committee are actually being heard and that we don't have a repeat of what happened with the school start time committee. Because in that instance, I think what we ended up with was contrary to the desires of the parents on the committee. And so I don't know. I mean, if what we're talking about is just minor changes to physical health, instruction, things like that, then I think everything is going to work out fine. But if a very controversial issue lands in this committee, then I think it is going to be very unfair to the people involved if they're having to have, if there's a split between staff and parents and that ends up being decisive. So,
If for some crazy reason there are 7 staff members that are in unison of some decision, and there are 21 others who are there that believe something else, then the 21 is a greater weight than the 7.
I guess we'll see. And I hope that doesn't happen, but I mean, this committee is, the reason these committees exist is because these issues are extremely sensitive and controversial. And so I just want to make sure the process we have going in is going to set them up for success and not for argument.
It's up to me to make sure that the parents are heard. That's always been my professional experience, is to listen to parents, and I don't see myself doing anything different to guide the staff that I work with, other than that, to make sure parents are heard and that we follow recommendations, as well as providing them facts and data that we can.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to ask, related to that, if there's some provision or means by which a sizable minority on that committee could issue a minority report expressing an opinion contrary to the whole.
Yeah, I think back to previous committees, not that I've led them, but it's important that the board receives not just, if there's a split, the board will hear, this is what the majority wanted, but this was the other opinion that had quite a few members perhaps wanting, so that you could see everything. My hope is that even before it gets there, that there's conversation and some kind of consensus, but the board is privy to having that knowledge to make an ultimate decision in cases like that.
And that's my recollection from the last time we looked at school start, was that that was well presented to us. And that's all I'm really concerned with, is that if there is a large minority, that we're at least aware that, you know, it was not a lopsided vote.
Absolutely.
Is there any other comment? Seeing no comment, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to what?
Mr. President?
Mr. Cottrell?
Yeah. I'd like to make the recommendation to approve the SHAC charges, timeline, and processes for appointing membership, please.
Thank you for that motion, Mr. Cottrell. Do I have a second? Mr. Sanchez, thank you for that second. Is there any further comment? See no comment, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the recommendation, please raise your right hand. And any opposed? So that passes 6-1. And Dr. Bayard, I think we are with you with 7A, program evaluation.
Almost. We are thankful to have Dr. Sheridan Henley with us
Right,
today. And I'm so happy Dr. Henley bringing back program evaluation, and she's here to present the program evaluation from the Department of Special Services for a program called N2Y. So Dr. Sheridan,
Are you
welcome.
driving? Or would you like me to?
You have one here, you can drive.
Good evening, board. Thank you all for letting me present to you and bring back program evaluations. It has, it's been fun. So this one was in partnership with the Department of Special Services and kind of just getting our feet wet back into program evals and the purpose of them. So before I start diving into the presentation, just N2Y in itself is a technology program purchased by the Department of Special Programs to help support teachers in getting the curriculum and the TEKS down to the level of students that are served in special education, alternative academics, and our structured learning labs. So with that, as a reminder, the purpose of a program eval is multifaceted, different things. We have gauges, evaluations, and summaries that really align the district goals and visions with the superintendent targets, with the community-based accountability report, or it assesses our strengths or weaknesses of our programs, or it can measure the success of the program in meeting its expressed goals, or it results in improvements or revisions to or a discontinuation of an existing program. A little more background information. We did align the N2Y program evaluation to the strategic plan, strategy 2, number 2, learning opportunities to foster growth, and educational tools, that's number 4, to improve student learning. We aligned it to the community-based accountability report in our pillar 1, which is student learning and progress, and pillar 5, which is professional learning and quality staff development. Alternative academics, so everyone knows, is a program within the Department of Special Services where students receive modified academic instruction in structured, consistent small group settings that access the TEKS through prerequisite skills. And it serves to help students that have cognitive disabilities get the curriculum. It also gives them skills for communication, social, vocational, and independent living skills. And our structured learning labs are to provide highly structured, predictable environments for early elementary students with the disabilities who require a little bit more restrictive settings so they can overcome usually a behavior so that they can access then the academic setting. So they're working through helping them through communication and social skills to address the problem behavior so they can learn academically. And of course, in special education, Department of Special Services, we always have terminology throughout. And so we have IEPs, individualized education plans, and these are written, designed for the student in agreement with the parent to kind of measure the goals each year that they're going to cover, and they address both academic, developmental, and functional needs for the student. And that is driven by the PLAF, or the present levels of academic achievement and performance, which really helps drive that IEP plan by asking what can this student do and what do they know right now. So now that background information, just to give you a little bit of an example of that prerequisite or essence statement that we're asking kids, I took a STAR reporting category from Algebra 1, where it says the student will demonstrate an understanding of how to use algebraic methods to manipulate numbers, expressions, and equations. So this would typically be your 9th grade student. That's the average kid that takes Algebra 1. Then you have the knowledge and skill, or the TEKS, which is A10, which is number and algebraic method, that says you're going to apply it in this mathematical process, standards and algebraic methods, and rewrite it in multiple ways. So then, to break that down for a student in alternative academics, or the SLL, we really have to look at that essence statement, where it says determines different forms of expression using operations or properties. And then I aligned it to our year at a glance, which is just, again, a broad statement for secondary. But I did that to show that that prerequisite skill looks very different for our students in alternative academics and our SLL programs. So now we get into N2Y, which used to be news to you back in the day. I think it was purchased in 2016-17, and it was news to you only, which was a printed monthly newsletter for students to kind of get information, kind of current events. And it has evolved and morphed over the years to now N2Y. They have 3 components that we use here in CCISD, and that's unique learning system, you'll see kind of highlighted in blue. And that really is a standards-based program to increase student access to the general curriculum. So this takes that essence statements and gives you tools and tricks to then kind of bring them in. They have 6 grade bands that we use, which is pre-K, K through 2, intermediate 3-5, middle school 6-8, high school 9-12, and then on to transition. Then it also kind of helps teachers and team leads, our instructional staff in Department of Special Programs, has the ability to track the student progress and help monitor those IEP goals and objectives. Another component we use with N2Y and CCISD is News to You. It is now monthly digital. It can be printed, but it also does the current events for different reading levels. And it also allows for text-to-speech, and you can access with symbol sticks. And then Symbol Sticks itself is a communication tool, is a repository of all these symbol sets that are used in creating communication boards for some of those students in the SLO program or in alternative academics. And it's used in more areas than just alternative academics and special and SLL, but it is a communication tool. So those are the 3 components. So working with Department of Special Programs, we really wanted to look at what are teacher perceptions on how do alternative academics and structured learning lab teachers utilize N2Y components. We wanted to know how it addresses the multiple learning needs of those students in those programs. And then how does it address, or does it address, student success? And so knowing those, we decided on 4 research questions. How appropriately does N2Y connect to the Texas curricular standards? In what ways do teachers utilize N2Y and its various components? In what extent does it empower those alternative education teachers? And then does it have any effect on student performance? Bless you. And so we move on to just kind of where N2Y, AA, and SLL is in our district. We have 34 campuses that support alternative academics or structured learning labs. If you'll see from the last 5 years, our student ratio has remained fairly the same, 8 to 1 and then 7 to 1 this year. We did see a 50% overall increase in AA students that are labeled as economically disadvantaged as compared to the district overall enrollment of 22% growth. Other demographic relationships stayed pretty consistent over those last 5 years. So we get into the financial information. In 2016-17 school year, there were 50 licenses purchased for a total cost of $26,910. In this 21-22 school year, 98 licenses were purchased for Unique Learning System at a total cost of $57,000 and change. There were 98 licenses purchased for News to You for a total of around $20,000 and change. And then Symbol Sticks Prime, there's 153 licenses. There are more licenses purchased for Symbol Sticks than for Unique Learning and for News to You because it's used in other programs in special services, not just AA. But if we did break down that total cost for the three components is $96,365.16. And then we did it per student. Mind you that per student for Symbol Sticks was only the AA and SLL numbers, but again, it's used more broadly than just those kids. So to use our data sources for this particular program evaluation, we really relied on the Department of Special Services, their instructional specialists, their parent handbook. We did a teacher survey with 44 respondents specifically for AA or SLL teachers in the district, and then we had a focus group of instructional specialists. You'll see that 50% of these students teaching in our district were first-year teachers in AA or SLL. And then on figure 6, you'll see that even though they're 50% were new to CCISD, we still had over 50% that were more 1 to 6 years of experience in teaching. They weren't just first-year teachers, teaching in AA or SLL. So if we go to answer the question, how appropriately does N2I align to Texas curricular standards, the teachers' perceptions were 50% of them said, yep, N2I aligns with state and district. When we break that down a little bit further, and you'll notice I color-coded the green is News to You, blue will be Unique Learning, because I'll switch between the components as I present. I meant to mention that earlier. But individual components, when I break it down, that 61.3 said, sure, News to You is aligned with state standards. When we looked at their perception of alignment to the learning progressions, which is our elementary progressions, or our year at a glance for secondary, there was a little disconnect there. When I even looked further, you'll see that secondary said, yeah, only 38.9% of our respondents said that it was really connected to our scope and sequence and our, whereas respondents to elementary 57.7%. When we asked our focus group about that data, they indicated that as the progressions for those standards get up into that secondary level, because they're N2Y's resources, or in this case, News to You resources, tend to duplicate some of their things or their information they give. For example, they'll do counting, and the first unit will be counting coins, and then the next time it'll be counting coins and bricks. They'll add on, but it's still the counting that's happening, so that rigor is not there as they move forward. When we looked at further breakdown of just secondary's perceptions of this alignment, we really looked at unique learning systems in this case, and you'll see that for math and English, the overall agreement is that that alignment to the district progressions is there. There's a difference and a disconnect between the science and social studies, and that happens because with unique learning, and this is that support program, they alternate months. So February might have been science, and January was science, and February is going to be social studies, and they'll go back to science in March and then April. So that really is not going to stay with our scope and sequence. It is aligned to the TEKS, but maybe not just our learning progressions. And so then when we talked about in what ways does it utilize, the teachers said 93% said yes, we access unique learning. 86 said News to You, I access it. 81% says I access Symbol Sticks. When we asked them if they regularly access it and use it, it dropped a little bit, but still 81% of the respondents said yes, I regularly access unique learning. 59% News to You, 45 Symbol Sticks Prime, and then 9% they didn't have regular use. What they typically use it for, though, is to build lessons, to make modifications and accommodations for the IEP. So when they're building out that plan for the year, they'll use this as a resource to help those goal setting. So when we look at teacher perceptions a little bit as far as empowerment, how does it give them empowerment for lesson planning in itself? 59, almost 60% of them says, yes, it helps me plan my lessons. It helps me give me resources to bridge that gap in where the student's individual needs are and what I'm needing to teach them in that essence statement. And then you'll see the breakdown of elementary and secondary. When it comes to analyzing student data, we still had 59% saying, yes, I agree. 65% elementary said, yeah, it helps me really analyze it. Secondary was a little bit less, but again, it goes back to that rigor and that connections of lessons. And then when we talked about technology integration overall, 65.9% said yes, that it really does align and integrate with our technology in our district. So when we talked about does it affect student performance, this is where our data was inconclusive. So back before, when we changed, right before the pandemic, we had that alignment of STAR, and when we came back, IEP goals and PLAFs changed. Rightfully so, and so it was hard to correlate the data in those STAR results with the change of goals. But overall, elementary, 65.4% of them said that it was effective in helping support academic and functional progress, and only 27.8% of the secondary. And again, it goes back to that rigor. So, summary of findings. So how did alternative or academics and structured learning labs teachers utilize the components of N2Y? Secondary teachers had a perception that it just wasn't quite aligned to our year at a glance, but it was aligned to the TEKS. Elementary teachers regularly report using it, but just maybe not to the full breadth of all of the components and the depth that we would have. In the question of how do N2Y components address multiple learning needs, all levels report alignment with technology resources, and then they really said unique learning system subdivided its lessons in those 6 grade bands so there's able to really customize and individualize for that need of that student. And then how does it address student success? There's some disagreement between elementary and secondary teachers on how they perceive that addressing student success. So based on the findings and the data from the full report, we have 3 recommendations that we are suggesting. 1, to work with Department of Special Services to really look at that alignment of the N2 resources to the district year at a glance, specifically the secondary courses. Just because of that agreement rate and the difference between the elementary and the secondary teachers' perceptions. And using that and working with the Department of Special Services instructional specialists to help the teachers understand what N2Y can actually do for them. The second recommendation is to go back and provide professional learning for all teachers. With that 50% of first-year teachers being there, and then that percent of just 1 to 3 using or teaching AA or SLL, then we really think that that training is going to help bridge that gap and make those connections into the resources that N2Y can, that can really give the breadth of the services that it can provide. And the last recommendation is because it was purchased in 2016-17, go ahead and research if there's any other comparable programs out there that is N2Y still the best one, is really the question. So having a focus group, a group of teachers and instructional specialists with Department of Services looking and see what other options are available out there. So that was our first program, Val, for you guys. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Henley. One question that just leaps out at me, does the state recommend any supplemental programs or anything like that? Not really?
I don't,
Not with-
I'm not,
Not in
I
this.
would not know the answer to that,
Okay.
but I don't believe so.
I was just curious.
Not,
Yeah.
for reading and for math, they have instructional materials that are selected by the state, but not for this.
But not, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll open it up. Mr. Bone?
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll just ask the very blunt question that comes to mind when I see some of these numbers. Why do we keep using this? I mean, obviously, if a majority of teachers don't respond on most of these questions that they agree that they're finding value in it and that there's alignment with what they need to be teaching, then instead of trying to train up the others to use the tool we've provided, maybe we just don't need this tool. Because, I mean, before 2016, we were able to teach this material, and a lot of teachers are not using it now. So, do the ones within the 40 to 50% who agree with a lot of these questions that were asked, I mean, do they really find good value in it, or is it more that they could take it or leave it?
So when they responded, of course, it's a survey, but based on the focus group response to that, they do see value in it. The neutral, I think, that you're seeing are some that we need to give a better explanation and connection to those resources with the essence statement that those kids have, that they need. It is a tool to help give teachers tips and it's a way to provide tools and support for those students that have those individual needs, where you've got in a, let's say, high school AA classroom, you have kids that are anywhere from the 3rd grade level, 2nd grade level, 5th grade level, 7th grade level, and you're trying to give them one lesson over math, and you're having to align all that together. So this is what N2Y really does for them. I think what is happening and what we're hearing in the focus group is really we need to explain that better and help get them there. But as again, one of the recommendations was to look and see if there is another program out there that is good or better than this one.
Also, if I might add, when we look at the demographics of the teachers, if they've been here under 3 years, we've had limited professional learning opportunities in the last 2.5 years. And so those that use it, since they find value in it, if those who use it didn't find value in it, then I think it'd be easy to say we need to discontinue this. But those that use it do find value, and so I think the next step is providing professional development, professional learning opportunities, and then reassess in a year.
So yeah, I guess that's maybe a better way to ask it is, have we found teachers who really do use this consistently and they really do find value in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Even if they're not a majority, there are some who really do depend on this.
Yes, sir. There
Okay.
I guess related to that, we saw a breakdown of the survey respondents with regard to elementary versus secondary. We also saw just demographic characteristics of the respondents in terms of how much time on the job and how much time with special ed. And my question would be, was there a significant difference in the survey responses based on the characteristics of the teachers, how long they've been?
As far as its number of years, or?
Yes.
I'm going to have to defer to my data analyst,
All right.
Mr. DeHart.
So on the whole, there wasn't much difference, but if you do want to, break it down to the different levels, there's probably more experience, not probably, there is more experience among the secondary teachers than among the elementary teachers, but not significant.
Okay. Well, I guess what I was searching for was, and maybe I should just ask my question a little more clearly. Was there a difference in whether teachers found value in it based on how long they had been teaching?
It varied. There was no consistency.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Sanchez?
I just had a question, thinking back to an item that we discussed a couple of meetings ago around us moving to Canvas as our platform, learning management platform. Do we know how compatible this is with Canvas, and will there be, I'm just curious if we'll find that there's more seamless integration between how teachers are able to use it, removing any obstacles or roadblocks, to how integrated it is into a system that I think we're going to find that they're using more, so that there are fewer roadblocks?
That is a great question, and my team will have to work with Department of Special Service and Technology to further investigate that with the Canvas platform. Not having it right now, there's no way I could answer that.
Okay. And I appreciate that you all went through and provided information. I hear Mr. Bowen asking about higher percentages of response rates and of utilization, I think we would be hard pressed to find in most industries where you would have higher response rates. I mean, unless it's life or death possibly, but I think as far as a tool and as a resource for our teachers to use, recognizing the populations that they're serving, I imagine that if we knew that there were better platforms, if there were other things that we could use, we'll be interested in learning more about that. I had a slightly different impression of the responses and the percentages, and I recognize it's not higher, but I think it's the percentages that are being shown lead me to believe that there is value. The question, I guess, would be is, are there alternative platforms? Are there alternative tools that we could be using that we think have demonstrated greater use in other districts, which I also would just expect that's what you all would help us think about and do in the future. So simply even doing this type of deep dive gives lots of people the information they need to consider that in the future. And so I would just say thank you for providing this today.
Dr.
Actually,
Dupont?
yeah, actually related to that, what is the contract cycle for purchasing this? Is it annually?
It's an annual.
And do you know when it comes up during the year?
They're yearly site licenses, so we could change at the school year.
Okay.
October, I think, is when I.
So, right, the fall sounds right.
Because to me, the between the recommendation 1 and the recommendation 3, I think there's some interplay between those two and kind of getting to what Mr. Sanchez said. But I think in order to evaluate other systems, you have to understand with this system where those correlations are with the curriculum. And so I think both of those things need to be done. My concern about this in general was whether we give professional learning to teachers when you're not quite sure about what those correlations are. It sounded like you needed to figure out what the correlations were, and then once you understand those, then you can also think about evaluating other programs, right? Because you know where those exist or don't exist. So just in my mind, there's a lot of interplay between all three of the recommendations, and so and then figuring out the contract cycle, because if it's October, there's some work to do before October to figure out if there's even a different package potentially. But, and also, thank you for the thorough, for the data and the thorough, I mean, it was nice to get back to a program review.
Right, yeah.
Are there any further questions or comment? Thank you, Dr. Henley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll turn it over to Dr. Williams.
Yes, so we are pleased to be able to share with you tonight information regarding a teacher retention sprint team that we convened to look at teacher retention. And it has become increasingly clear through the years that, and particularly this year and most of the last month or so, that teacher retention needs to be an even bigger focus than it has been. We know and we've heard that this is the case, and not just from teachers, we've heard it loudly from campus-based leaders regarding the need to focus on teacher retention. And yes, we want to recruit great teachers, and we want to retain great teachers and other strong members of our employee team. So one thing that we hear consistently from teachers is that they need time. We've heard that in previous years, but we've heard that more than ever this year and more than ever the last month. And really time to join with colleagues to analyze data and plan lessons, but also time just to work independently to execute plans, including plans that they've developed with colleagues. And we'll observe that demands on teachers have risen exponentially through the years. And so, you know, we had the retired employees event recently. Today we had Teachers of the Year, Our teachers continue to amaze us in terms of planning, engaging lessons that capture student attention, that address individual needs, the fact that they provide timely feedback to students to help them to continue to grow academically. And they do all that they do, with a loving heart, with patience, with persistence, to support students. And that includes students, the fact that we've got more frequently students with behavior challenges that interfere or have the potential of interfering with their own learning and the learning of others. And, teachers approach those students and all students with that loving attitude, that patience and persistence, like, hey, we're gonna make this work. I'll also note that we do share the importance of home life balance, and those are words that we share with great sincerity. But we need to continue to take actions that back up that emphasis on work and home balance. And so we've convened then the teacher sprint work group, and we intentionally used the word sprint team because we wanted, as you'll hear this evening, there were just a couple meetings, and so we wanted to come out of those meetings with hopefully being able to have some actionable items that we can implement immediately, while also recognizing that this can't just be a couple meeting thing, that we need to continue and persist with conversations about this. So in addition to time, as you'll hear, we heard feedback. We heard feedback about the importance of positive school climates. We heard information about the importance of our of initiatives and making sure we have consistency across schools, making sure that we have clarity, not just with internal stakeholders, but not just with external stakeholders, but internally with folks in terms of what's expected. And so this evening, you will hear recommendations regarding adding several professional development or planning days to the calendar for next year. And as I said, yes, we want to take other actions relating to climate, relating to initiatives, but we also believe that this is these would be tangible modifications to the calendar that give teachers what they need, and that's time to work together, and it's also time to work independently. And on one hand, this reflects paying attention to adult needs, but we need to pay attention to adult needs in order to best serve our students. And so we're excited about the possibilities that we're bringing to you this evening, and we would, based on, it is our hope then that we could return in 2 weeks and ask the board to take action on these modifications to the calendar for next year, and we would do that based on your feedback this evening. And so I'm going to turn this over to Holly Hughes and Susan Silva, and I'm excited for you all to hear some specific things that we think would be of great help to our teachers in their work to serve our students.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, for this opportunity. Thank you to the board for always supporting our teachers and the great things happening in Clear Creek ISD. As you know, Clear Creek ISD is one of the top workplaces in Houston, according to the Houston Chronicle. You know that, and also noted to be one of the best employers by Forbes. We're thankful that we have a strong recruitment effort, and thankful for our Human Resources Department that puts us out front to recruit great teachers. But today we're specifically focused on our retention of those great teachers. We know the accolades are certainly based on our great teachers and staff, as Dr. Williams shared. So fitting today that we celebrated them in our Teachers of the Year celebration today. But the unprecedented demands are what brought this committee forward, and some of the nature of the work and the demands that we place in our own district based on our own expectations in the classrooms, but others are just occurring naturally due to the pandemic. We're certainly not alone. According to Hanover Research Study, 33% of teachers report they're very likely to leave the profession in the next 2 years. We invest too much in Clear Creek ISD and our teachers to have them leaving Clear Creek ISD. The national study, it says it's up 13% more before from the pandemic. In the same study, 77% of the teachers feel somewhat or extremely stressed. The percentage of outpaces employee, adults, and other professions. That's part of what brought this and lifted up and stands behind this committee work. So I want to share with you our teacher retention sprint team. We are thankful for the work of a committee coming together. We looked at our data. We've seen a higher percentage of teachers this year, outside the peaks of COVID, certainly, that we're having greater teacher absences. We start the day every morning working on addressing our student absences. Anecdotally, we know many teachers are taking days off to grade papers, plan, or just for mental wellness. In a response to that, we pulled together this teacher retention sprint team to address that challenge. The group consisted of teachers voices, principals, parents, DEIC committee members, campus administrators, district administrators. We met just 2 dates there, but definitely got plans. We have plans to continue the work. We met with this goal in mind, and that is to retain the greatness in Clear Creek ISD. We know that our teachers are the single most important factor impacting our student outcomes, and we kept this in mind, and we'll continue to do so. We believe in our teachers, we believe in our teacher workforce, and we want to continue to support them to make great things happen for kids. Students go to school to connect with their teachers. That relationship is the number one thing that drives students to school each day, and we know that we have a chance to reset as we go into the next school year. When teachers are absent, student engagement is impacted, and so we definitely wanted to look at the data and review this as we went forward. So thinking through our work, although quick, it's a mighty crew, and work diligently through lots of different sources of gaining information and data. We had 3 themes that emerged, as Dr. Williams shared. One of the greatest points was time. You've spoken to a teacher or a staff member at a campus this year, likely you've heard that there is a wish or a need for thinking about time. If we want teachers to personalize learning, to design engaging first-time instruction, we must create time for them to do that work. Certainly each teacher right now is allocated to have a 45-minute planning period in the day. The reality of that we came through this committee is that, and this team, that is often not protected due to just the varying demands of this year, of ARDs, of meetings, and other pieces, and filling in for other teachers that they have been supporting. Initiatives, there's a huge conversation around this within our district that we want to continue making those great opportunities happen for kids within our district, but we are asking a lot of our teachers, and to do them all well is something that the committee and the team has asked for us to come back around to focus in our attention and efforts to clarify for them. And then culture. There are some artifacts that have become absolutes in our district, and there's some pieces that emerged for us to discuss there. So these are the 3 that we'll just touch base on today. But the largest is certainly rethinking time. If we are going to, and I would say from across the board, we looked at what could we do to provide support for our teachers and thinking about time. We looked at the use of early release time. We looked at the professional time they have during the day and outside of the day. We looked at our professional learning days and also protected days that we've had and late arrivals for our secondary. We identified pros and cons of each, and we definitely had great discussions around those. It's a pre-K-12 discussion, and so there was a lot of interesting dialogue across the board. But we definitely made recommendations for change. in initiatives, and we'll talk more about that time in just a minute, but if we are going to find time for our teachers to plan well, to provide instruction well, and to use the data that is coming to them, we've got to allow and make sure that we're using the time that we provide for them to the fullest advantage, and that'll be a piece that we'll continue to talk about. Initiatives. Our teachers want, they're mentioned and shared that they want time-bound signposts for the work that we are working around with our initiatives, with guideposts and with markers to make that clearly communicated, that we would provide professional learning time focused on those essential initiatives, and certainly that we'd prioritize those. And also the request came for district-created video clarifying a consistent message regarding those district initiatives. It is, as one teacher, I believe, shared, and perhaps an elementary teacher, it's initiative fatigue, that we are trying to do all the things in all the great ways because we want the great experiences for children, but yet that how can they do them all well? And that's the balance that we kept coming back to as an essence of how are we going to provide time to plan it, and how are we going to provide that well. I think stated also in the committee that our teachers are working so hard and they have such high expectations for themselves and for their students. Yet the level of which they hold themselves to and what they hold their teaching to has been certainly a struggle for many reasons, pandemic related, but also in this time of trying to push forward. So definitely focusing on that reset for next year. And this is certainly ties into with the culture piece as well about creating those consistent expectations. If there's something that's coming out of the pandemic that we can say for teachers and for our campus leaders, they enthusiastically are looking for consistency. We all are craving consistency, and that consistency comes in the day-to-day life, but also in the expectations that we have in our classrooms, and that's something that has been somewhat elusive this year for many factors, but we're thinking ahead and planning for next year and looking to see what can we control to make that happen. The culture, just the clarifying the priorities and the use of time for the time that we do have this year has been on the backs of the last year as well. We've made it work. We've made it, and teachers have made great things happen for kids. But it's a time to reset and to provide that clarity and that professional learning and that structure support and a system that build that coherence across the district. And I said here, it says keep it authentic, but what teachers really said is keep it real. Keep it real. Do not provide a schedule or expectations of all the initiatives and the teaching that needs to happen that goes and extends beyond the school day, that we don't have hours in the day to accomplish. So they're looking for us to rethink culture, and a document that has been used in elementary school to try to provide a support. I can speak to this. It was called a time to teach document, in which we tried to provide a guide for teaching in the classroom where we had a certain amount of time for math, reading, small group, different things. We plan so much in the day, there is it overtakes the hours within the school day almost. It may not be a time for much recess or bathroom breaks in there. We've maxed out the day, and it doesn't give an authentic picture to the expectations of the school day. And so to the culture piece, keep it authentic or keep it real. And then initiatives and culture, those are things that we have some time to come back and work on through the summer and through the year as we continue on our long-range work to retain our great teachers. But one thing that we know that we wanted to bring to you today is a recommendation about time. Our teachers have asked for the chance to have time to plan and not just be involved. We have a rich professional learning department and team, and we value professional learning as an organization as we continue to grow. But we also need to put that professional learning to work, and so part of that is implemented by planning. And so we had a great discussion in our group that first started with, could we add additional early release days through the calendar, and could we provide that time throughout the year for ongoing planning throughout the year? And we had rich discussion about that, but consensus was reached, however, over further discussion about really maximizing continuous instruction. It'd be less disruptive if we added just the full days. And so the group first looked at adding additional Wednesdays, and we looked at the days of the week. We looked at many different options, but came back to this being the recommendation that we'd like to bring forward to you, and to identify September 19th, February 6th, March 20th, and April 17th as new instructional planning days. It's a new indicator on our calendar, and you have a draft calendar just to look at that, to visualize what that would look like. This proposal certainly would meet our time requirements. I'm going to let Dr. Silva talk about that a little bit in just a minute. We also talked about a system-wide expectations for professional learning days that we'll still have on the calendar, as well as these instructional planning days, to be clear about the intention and purpose. That if we say that a teacher has time to plan and implement, that is consistently held across every campus, and that is a clear expectation. And so there's work to be done there. Certainly creating the video messaging to clarify the initiative expectations. We've been moving quickly and without the professional learning days that we typically have had, and so there's a need for us to be intentional about creating that messaging for our internal communication, perhaps as well as external, but this is certainly looking at our internal communication for staff members. And then there was a real win from the campus staff on thinking about retaining our staff. A win that we had was when we released staff before spring break. It was typically a day. That was a decision that was made and well received by the staff. And so as long as we're looking at time and trying to look at retaining staff, those days, those early release days that we still have indicated on the calendar before winter break, spring break, and summer, that those would be release times. That would be certainly for professional staff, and then our paraprofessionals work the time to make that time work for their calendars. So from a quick sprint, and it was a sprint, Dr. Williams, you shared that well, that these are the initial recommendations coming out of that quick work, but definitely know we have more work ahead. But on the matter of time, Dr. Silva, do you want to speak a little bit more about the time and the dates that we have up there and what that looks like in a calendar?
Sure. You have a draft calendar in front of you, so you see one of them was added in the fall and then 3 in the spring, and that was mainly due to the fact we had some instructional planning days already on the calendar. So our goal was to put at least one a month, and so we already had Columbus Day in October, and then the election day in November. So that's why they look heavy in the spring that are blue, but essentially that spreads them out throughout the year. So we were able to add these. You may remember in March on the consent agenda was to apply for a TEA waiver for 2,100 staff development minutes. So essentially with that waiver through TEA, we can trade in professional development minutes and consider those instructional minutes up to 2,100. And so we were able to add a few more onto the calendar, and we're still well within and have actually extra minutes for next school year sort of built in. We have weather days already designated on the calendar, but no one really likes when we have to use a weather day. So we usually have several hundred extra minutes in case we need them. For example, this year we used 3 days. 2 you might remember with Hurricane Nicholas in September, and then 1 in February. And we still had enough minutes to not use our weather days. And so with the addition of these 4 professional learning days listed up here on this slide, we still would have a little over 5 days of minutes banked in case we needed to use them for weather related or other closures.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for sharing that. Once again, the committee first decided, we looked at Wednesdays
Yep.
as our early release days or possibly PL days, thinking that It's important for our staff to attend if we were able to restructure time. It's important that staff members know the importance of being there to utilize this time for the work. But thinking about community impact and parents and moving those days to perhaps to Monday would allow for the college visit, would allow for some additional things for families, and certainly work with their schedules in a more effective manner. We also have talked about possibilities for what that would look like for even our staff members. We know that childcare is an issue. Looked at possibilities of plans to support that. But also know that our community members, the time away from the classroom would be an impact. But talking with our daycare providers and getting that message out, that's part of why we are bringing this communication to you today. We had an incredible team, and I want to thank them for the work and thank for folks that were that joined in the discussion. It was powerful to hear straight from our teachers and from our campus staff as to the impact this year has had and what their hopes are for the upcoming school year. So these are recommendations that came through to the committee that were lifted up. Definitely want to respond and to any questions that you may have. But also, as Dr. Williams alluded to in the opening statements, we would love to bring this back to a board meeting for additional action.
Thank
you. Thank you for this opportunity. And our teachers are going to thank you too.
Thank you for that presentation, Holly, and definitely thank all of the community members for getting together and recognizing that this was an area that we needed to focus on. So I'll open it up for questions or comment.
I have a couple of observations, and the first one was earlier we had presentations on PLCs, and those were widely, my perception was they were quite popular, and partly because they really allowed our teachers to leverage their time much better and get a lot more accomplished with the time they had. I saw that was one of the options here, and one of the things you looked at in addition to additional professional learning days and additional early releases. And I'm just, I guess the first of my two questions would be, are we doing everything we can to leverage PLCs as much as possible in terms of alleviating the time crunch for teachers?
Thank you for asking that. And I didn't go into detail because I think it warrants further discussion. Part of that consistency and clarity, I think we are maximizing that time that we can right now. If they're not covering classes, if they're not having to sub for other classes and cover other classroom teachers. So having that protected time is of the essence. The committee and the teachers felt very strongly, as we've heard here, of the value of the PLC process, but they want that time committed so that they can make it work. And so these IP days could certainly allow, if we indicated a portion of time for that PLC work to be done, and that would be committed. That's part of what we would have to come back with as far as that clarity of plan and consistency across the district so that everyone has that opportunity.
Okay, thanks. And I guess my other question would be another initiative of ours, and that's personalized learning. And I would like to know if the general perception is that implementing personal learning greatly adds to the time crunch or greatly helps with it, or anything in between?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That is a great question. I can tell you, working with elementary school, that the perception is that it is going to greatly add to their work. Mm-hmm. The reality is it has become greatly, some planning work, it creates great efficiency in the classroom.
And if I can add to that and ask you to elaborate as well. So specifically, the concern is among schools who have not yet participated.
Correct.
There's not that same sentiment or anxiety among schools who have participated, but there is nervousness, and we are very intentional in terms of the way it's implemented to build on previous work, because there's been work related to personalized learning through the years. So it's the important part is connecting with that and allowing adult choice in which aspects of personalized learning people will choose to work on, and And so I would ask for, if any of the folks at this table would want to elaborate on that or reinforce it.
I think that's absolutely true. I think the fear of the unknown, and so we have 10 schools that are in it, and they're feeling pretty positive. It's May, so they've been in it for a while, but we have a lot that are joining next year, and the fear right now for them to add another thing, that's how they perceive it right now, and as they talk to their peers and go through it, I think they'll see that it's different than what they're anticipating today, maybe.
We had a similar fear from the currently 10 participating, of anticipating that this year was going to drown them with personalized learning, and they found that it has made their classrooms, like Ms. Hughes said, more efficient, and that it is very much related and connected to the work of personalized learning that has been done in the district for many years now.
And the PLC work. And the campus, the feedback that we received from the teachers and as well as campus-wide staff, it has been almost a 10 out of 10. So thankful for that. Great feedback.
Okay, and I guess with that in mind, I guess what I'm hearing from all that is we should just continue down that path, and that won't be a significant burden on, this time crunch for the teachers.
I think the burden has been just trying to get time away for the professional learning and to provide the substitutes to get that. That's just the balance has been to pull off the professional learning. It's been a commitment that we've made at all costs to make that time happen.
And I want to give a shout out to board members, because consistently we've had very productive, and you all have valued the conversations during workshops where you've been able to hear directly on the impact on teachers. But throughout those conversations, consistent feedback that you all have given us as board is to think with intentionality about communication, both with internal and external stakeholders. So when we brought superintendent targets to you for next year, it reflected the consistent board member input and feedback that we want a consistent focus on that communication. And so you'll recall that in the superintendent targets then, in the accompanying notes, there were references to communication plans. And so we feel like the conversations, the feedback we got from the Sprint work group affirmed that, because they were saying, we want clarity on the initiatives. So what does this look like? And so even with personalized learning as an example, as we roll it out to the remaining elementary schools, we will be focusing very explicitly on the communication, not just with the external folks, but with internal folks, in order to lower anxiety and increase that sense of ownership sooner rather than later. So the board's feedback on that communication piece has been appreciated.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez.
Holly, thank you all for looking at this. I shared with Dr. Williams the other day that I had the chance to speak to a student who asked some questions if we were anticipating increased challenges around teacher retention. And so when I asked a question back, it was a scout. When I asked a question back, I said, I'm surprised that you would ask me a question about this. He says, well, my parents are hearing from some teachers, and they're just concerned because there are teachers who have gone above and beyond, like many of our teachers do, during times that I think have been more challenging than in recent times. And so I do think it's really important. And so I appreciate you all looking at this, and I think about the themes that you all identified or that came through from time, the initiatives and the culture, and I think as clear as it is to identify the time that you all have already outlined, I wonder if you've talked about how that will translate from an initiatives and a culture perspective, and our ability to really share that back to teachers and even to parents, so that there is really an awareness that as a district we recognize how challenging all of this is on our entire ecosystem, our education ecosystem. And I think that it will help significantly for people to know that this is the first step. We intend for there to be more, and that is a reflection of the feedback that we're getting. And so I think it's really valuable, and I appreciate y'all doing this. I just wonder if you've talked about what some of that communication looks like going forward.
I think you're spot on, and that they are certainly tied together, and the intentionality that we need to place as a system to build out that clear, consistent communication to see how it all fits together, rather than just sharing that conversation here about how PLCs impact personalized learning. We need to see that. Teacher efficacy is so important. This job is hard. Our teachers work so hard. They want to know that they are making that impact and that they're meeting expectations and all that this district hopes for them to bring forward with students. And so that's that clarity that we need to provide for them so that they can continue feeling strong about their work and feeling confident in their role and feeling success in Clear Creek ISD.
I'm glad you asked your question because Ms. Hughes did a great job facilitating this committee, and they have a whole lot more to say, many more ideas. What was pressing is the calendar, because we know of those changes that it has an impact on families. So that sprint part, they sprinted, but there's a whole lot more that I know they're just ready to share, and they've started already. But I know that'll continue with many more ideas that they have.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Dr. DuPont?
That actually was part of what I wanted to ask about or just say something about. I think I'm sure that there were a lot of things that were actually brought up. And I actually had a question written down under culture when it talked about consistent expectations. That can be taken a lot of ways. And did that have to do with like dress code, behavior, all of the above, a lot more added on too, because that's super broad. So
Yes, the answer is yes to all of that. Yes, jeans were a discussion topic for a moment, but yes, but there's much more to discuss about culture, and it is broad. The want for clarity and that consistency, and the district, and once again, that reinforced district-wide message is what we heard over and over again. I think they want to make sure that their campus is in the same place, and their work and their expectation of their campus and the time allocated and provided is consistent with another campus, and that they are all moving forward to meet that expectation. But it was yes, the theming was broad, and the work is still to be done on more of that. But it was that's a wide theme for many aspects.
Yes,
I don't know,
it's
Dr.
huge.
Silva, did you have anything else on?
No, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to, and you often ask us about fidelity across the district. Is it happening here? Is it happening here? And I think teachers have that same feeling. And so the more clearly we can articulate what the expectations are, the better that will become. And so that's some of the work, obviously, for recommendations, is to clarify some things to
So I
keep it
guess there's a
consistent.
couple things that come to mind in thinking about that, and one is that the committee, this was a sprint effort, but that the committee continue its work and that it be an ongoing thing. But I think there's also something in the, like, are some of these questions and issues being asked in any kind of teacher survey or employee survey?
They are, and we actually had speaking of PLC, one of the superintendent targets is a PLC gauge, program gauge, and so we've had teacher focus groups, and so we're some of the questions from that came through it loud and clear that they want this work, but they need time and dedicated dates to plan with that. So yes, there's a little bit of survey data from the survey, but also from the focus groups is giving us a little more information there.
That's great, and I
things.
would hope that all that information is presented to the board too, so the board can see, based on the things that are implemented, what the changes are, and how teachers feel about that, and maybe even not just an end-of-year survey, but throughout the year or something
I
else
think
related to
the quote
that.
lifted up was a dire need for planning days. So I was looking at my notes, so
That
what
was
was
the
that
quote.
exact lifted up quote? But it's a dire need. So
That's it.
it was.
Well, and I think we've seen, I've seen other districts that are going to even 1 day a week to 4-day weeks, so that there's 1 day a week. Obviously, there's a need for that planning time. So I appreciate trying to consider options for how to do that. I also appreciate that what has traditionally happened is the professional learning during the day when subs have to be brought in, and so it impacts learning time. It impacts
Right.
learning time in the classroom. And so I think this is a good way of not allowing that to happen and approaching it in a different way and still maybe even providing more time to teachers too. So I think that's really appreciated from the parent perspective also, because that's something we always hear about. And then, I guess just as you were talking about, teachers requesting clarification regarding initiatives, and I know that that's one of the big issues is all the different things that are being pulled into professional learning. And I go back to, again, what Mr. Sanchez mentioned about, Canvas is coming up. And I think we talked about that even as we had those discussions about approving Canvas, that is going to need to come into professional learning, and it's going to need to be done before August, before next year starts. And so to the extent that that can get pulled in. So I think there's an appreciation of actually thinking about those things too, and that you can't just keep adding things onto the pile and asking the teachers to do that with it.
A real commitment from this came loud and clear that we need to provide time for professional learning and to learn new tasks such as Canvas, but we also need to give dedicated time to allow them to plan and implement. And so that was a piece that I just need to reiterate, because anyone on that committee is going to want to make sure that we are clear and intentional about that time.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I think it's, I think this is wonderful. We know our teachers did an absolutely amazing job during the COVID, to do the virtual teaching, and how stressful that was. And the years have, while maybe they've gotten better, the stress level has not reduced. If anything, it's increased because, like you say, the initiatives, and I think maybe you've heard this from some of the teachers that responded, but so that social emotional learning is pretty important, but yet when that's added into duties that they have to accomplish on a daily basis, it has to come from other learning or other teaching that they're giving the kids. So I totally understand they need more time. I wonder if the RCC, if that's going to be an added challenge to the teachers, or is that a program that, I mean, I just wonder if that's going to be an added challenge, that kind of like the unfunded mandates from the federal government. As the administration, we have to deal with those, but the teachers have to just implement whatever is coming down from above. I know one of the teachers I have communicated with indicated that so much of the time is spent on trying to bring these kids up to the level where they're supposed to be at right now. That's got to be monumental, just trying to deal with that, but then trying to educate them as well. I know from being on campuses, behavior in classrooms is a big problem for some teachers. Some teachers handle it very well. Coaches have really loud voices that kids will kind of calm down and listen. But the teachers don't necessarily feel like they got support from the administration to deal with those problem kids that are disrupting their class so they can teach the rest of the kids. And again, that might be the culture part that we're talking about here. I know the planning periods, right. They've got planning periods, but they're always pulled into ARDS, or they're covering another classroom or doing something like that. Oddly enough, I was quite surprised when I came on a campus to find out that those professional learning days were not for them to grade papers and get caught up in stuff. It was, they spent that entire time learning something else. So I think this is a fantastic idea. However many days we need to add for the teachers to have that time to themselves is definitely a great investment. The early release days prior to the holidays, being on campus, I remember getting those grades in before they went home for Christmas or whatever was a challenge. But I'm sure that they could do the same thing with an early release. They would make sure that those grades were in before 11 o'clock or whatever time they left. Another thing, I would love to find a way to get these teachers some more money. And just the thought process I had is, maybe we could have some kind of program. I keep going back to when Dr. Smith first came on board at CCISD. I was just a temporary worker, but he put out an initiative, let's see who can cut their electric bills down at the schools. And then there was some way for them to share in the savings. I would love to do the same thing. Let's find ways for teachers or staff to find ways to save money. And then maybe that money could be redistributed in forms of incentive pay or something like that. But definitely, it's been very challenging for teachers these last few years, and we can't afford for them all to decide that another career is better. We've got to find ways to keep them involved and stay where they are and educate our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Bowen?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. I do like these recommendations a lot, and I think they are a very good start. But I kind of, to echo what Ms. Davis said, planning periods are extremely important as well. And so it is one thing to have days set aside for professional learning and instructional planning, but having the intermittent breaks in the middle of the day, I think, is also a necessary thing just for everyone to stay sane. And so if when we put these requirements on teachers, those are always the first blocks of time to go. And so we need to figure out some way long-term to protect that time for teachers and make sure that they've got it to actually do what needs to be done during the day and recharge and come back to their classes refreshed. And so I'd like for this committee to before everything is over, figure out some way to protect that planning period time as best as we can.
Mr. Cottrell?
Yeah. So, thank you, Ms. Hughes and Dr. Silva, for, and the district for making this a priority. I know it is to all of us, and this is very important right now, given everything we've been through for the last few years. I made a little note when you said keep it real, because I was doodling on keep it realistic, keep it respectful, respecting their time. If we're talking about retention, and they're saying time, there's so many different ways to look at that, but I think them feeling like we respect their time, because they have families too, and when they are spending the time teaching everyone else's kids, we need to make sure that they understand how important that time is and be respectful of that time. I'm surprised I don't see like days on here where they can work in their classroom, because I know I helped someone for like 20 years, getting a classroom ready every year. And that was something that I always remember hearing is, I wish I had more time in my classroom. I wish I had more time in my classroom. And I think that would really be valuable for the teachers to have that time in their classroom, that whether they're putting up the boards and borders and all the things, the calendars, but I appreciate this. And just one little, curious, February 6th, how did y'all come up with that one? I heard you say you were trying to kind of spread them out, right? We have the 19th as a IP day and a potential makeup day. And so then to have the 6th, the one in between, is the day after Super Bowl. So
We were not
I had
considering the
proposed,
Super Bowl.
remember, I had proposed that
mercy.
the day after Super Bowl be a
We
holiday.
discussed many things, but not that.
So I'll tell
But
you that.
you went one before and one after.
So I'll tell you, I like that idea, but I'll tell you the thinking. We typically have 2 district professional development days throughout the year, and it's usually the Tuesday of the back to school week, and then it's historically either been on Martin Luther King Day, which used to be a P Day, or on President's Day, which is that 20th of February. And so there's a likelihood that will probably remain as the district day. which would then give them the day on campus to do just what you were talking about in their classroom, working with their PLC planning, and then some time. Yeah. Super Bowl is the 12th, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, Monday, like I said, again, I promise I wasn't sitting on my computer trying to figure out when Super Bowl was next year. I swear I was. It just so
We
happens.
looked through a lot of lenses, but
But-
not that one.
That was not one of them, but I will
Just
say
saying,
that we
go on.
have extra day for spring break for
Right.
Look at that.
students, and that was strategic.
Yes.
What
No,
about the World Series?
Well, I appreciate
I'll
everything
circle that and put Super Bowl by.
Yeah, and again, going forward, listening to their needs and their families' needs, and being respectful of that time. I mean, I know it was the first bullet on the themes, and I don't know if that was by design or priority. But my experience between my family, lots of different family members being in education, the time is very important from so many different avenues. So being respectful of that time when they're here and when they're not, and grading, I know that was mentioned as well. And I heard Jean's mentioned, and I know that was always a big thing, but I think for retention, respecting their time is the biggest thing that we can all do. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Guttrell. Any other comment?
Thank you. We're fortunate to have such incredible teachers that choose to teach in Clear Creek ISD. We want to continue to focus on their efforts and to continue to support them doing the great work they do for kids every day. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you for that presentation. And with no further business before the board, I'll adjourn us at 7:16.